Hello, everybody. Brian Tulsa here. We're going to watch part 2 of Deception of a Generation. This is the day after I watched part 1. I've got a new drinking game for this one. That is drink coffee every time they say the word occultic. Occultic. It's their favorite word. Christ in a crutch. So, my criticism of part 1 is that they're trying to say that the child projects himself or herself onto the toy. They don't like the toy because they feel like the toy will influence the child away from their religion. But the association runs the wrong direction. They're saying the child projects self on the toy, but they're giving the toy credit for projecting itself on the child. So what we have to do now is to ignore what they're actually saying and go with what they probably mean. And what they probably mean is that the toy influences the child, because that's their core criticism and their problem with the toy. So let's see what they will criticize now. I have part 2 queued up, and let's press start and get going. You ready?
And the Lord told me that children were being affected by these things and that I was to do something about it, which proceeded in me starting studying this material over 2.5 years ago.
Well, we've
God
seen
talked to him
over
directly.
the last several years a slow, subtle, occultic influence in our cartoons, but it's become so blatant. When do you feel this blatant turn towards the occult and witchcraft really took on its momentum?
Don't drink when he says occult, only
He-Man
occultic.
And the Masters of the Universe.
Masters of the Universe.
He-Man and the Masters of the Universe really broke the ground on this cartoon occultism. In fact, it set so many records. It was turned down by all 3 major networks, by the way. It was the first cartoon to go through independent TV stations as a first-run cartoon, and it covers 95% of America.
So you're saying He-Man was like an occultic forerunner to really
So
blast
He-Man,
this into the public's eye.
fantasy toy line.
The cartoon people have no problem getting another one through. They say, well, it's just like He-Man. But He-Man was such a tremendous success. In fact, it got as much as a 22-point Nielsen rating in many areas.
He-Man was very popular.
Well,
Great fantasy toy for children.
Let's watch on the screen right
Fantasy.
now and see an opening to a He-Man series and see some of the occultic overtones as we begin this. We're going to play a little segment here showing the transformation of He-Man.
Oh, goody, now we get to watch He-Man.
Power of Grayskull.
He shoots that white beam at the pussy, and the pussy grows.
Well, now, Phil, here we're seeing a transformation of He-Man from a wimp, like a Clark Kent type of character, to the He-Man, and he says something like the power of Grayskull. Is that correct?
Yes, what you just seen is He-Man being transformed. In fact, his name is Adam.
Yeah.
First man.
Interesting.
Until he's transformed, and then he becomes He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe, by lifting his sword in the air and yelling by the power of Grayskull.
Yeah.
Now, to understand this,
He wants to make a point of the alter ego being named Adam, because that's from the Bible.
And there's a demon spirit living within it that manifests in the shape of the
there's no
skull.
significance.
And so our good character is empowered by occultic demon spirits.
You're kidding me.
Occultic.
So all of this is coming forth, and the children, whether consciously or subconsciously, are picking up all these occultic overtones.
Occultic.
Oh, very much so.
You know, I received this letter. I thought I might read it here. lady had written to the Eagle's Nest, and she said, "How harmless are the cartoon characters on the Masters of the Universe program for children?
It's
My sister-in-law
fantasy.
allows her son to watch this television show, and he also has all the characters, He-Man, Skeletor, who you see on the screen right now, and the Castle of Grayskull, to which this little 2-year-old boy repeats from the
He's
show
2?
by the power of Grayskull." Here's a little boy repeating, 2 years old.
2 years
by the
old?
power of Grayskull, and she says,
You
he
can't
holds
give that
his
to a
hands up,
2-year-old.
saluted
He'll
to the
break 'em and
sky.
he'll
So a 2-year-old
eat
is
all of
actually learning
the
these things.
swords
Well, the
and
Bible
stuff.
says, "Dear children,
I believe
let nothing take
those
God's
toys
place in
are
your
approved
hearts."
for
Right.
ages
And
3 and up.
He-Man is being lifted up as a god, and many children are receiving him as such. In fact, I was talking to one lady, and I've heard
Nobody
a
thinks
number of
He-Man is a
experiences
god.
like this, but she said, my little boy was in the back seat of the car, and a radio preacher came on and said, "Our Lord God, the master of the universe." And her boy jumped from the back seat of the car and said, "Mommy, God isn't master of the universe, He-Man is."
What? A little boy said that He-Man is the master of the universe?
Oh, even more so, I've got another
He-Man-
one. My dad was talking about my presentation in a church, and a little boy was seen afterwards. I mean, I didn't even do the presentation. And afterwards, he was seen in the parking lot. Now, this is a kid growing up in a Christian home, going to church, Sunday school, the
Hold
whole
on.
shot.
Right.
I know
Out in the
which story he's
parking lot
going to
with
tell.
He-Man in his hand, running around in circles, saying, "He-Man has more power than Jesus.
He-Man has more power than Jesus.
So we can assume
I-
that millions of children
okay.
that you say watch these programs.
I don't know if that story is
are
even
having
true,
their
but even if it
minds
is,
transformed
if that kid was
from
running around there
reading the
saying
Word of
He-Man
God,
has more
believing
power
what the
than
Bible
Jesus,
says,
you
to
know, after
believing
church
what the cartoons
with,
are saying. They
you
have
know,
that kind of influence on their
family
minds.
Right, they're
and church
taking
people
on many
around.
gods. Many gods.
Well, let's look
A
at it.
kid
what
doesn't
this
come
is
up with that
spawning
on
in our
its
Toy
own
Story.
unless
Each
he's taking the
cartoon
piss out
is
of
spawning
the
little
adults.
toys that represent the cartoon. Is that correct?
Right.
All right,
I could
then I'm gonna show you a
at a
He-Man
younger age I
figure
could see
here.
myself doing that.
And
Just
he's
when
got
I
this,
wanted to be
what do you
bratty,
call this
you know,
sword here?
around all the
Well,
Jesus
that's the
people, I'd be
sword
like,
of power.
He-Man has
But
more
as we
power than
talk
Jesus.
about
He-Man,
he
but
becomes transformed.
I
Now,
but I
from
don't know
He-Man,
that that
we
story
need
is
to
even
take a
true
look
because
at
I just don't.
Skeletor.
I
Okay,
can't
now this
imagine
is the
too many
He-Man, a
kids
muscular
coming
figure
up
and so
with
forth
that
mostly
on their
little boys
own.
follow, I take it?
Right.
But the little girls have someone.
Kind of
too.
wish I had that
many little
He-Man
girls play
figure
with
now.
this
Oh, really? Well, let's look at Skeletor now. We've got him up on our screen.
Skeletor.
And Skeletor is this ugly-looking skeletal creature.
Yes, he's the
with
bad
a
guy.
staff in his hand. Now, what's that staff that he's got in his hand?
The staff is a ram's head staff. Now, the ram's head is a very occultic symbol. It's
Occultic.
built in cauldrons. It's used in different occult practices. But when it's seen on the staff, it's called a Norok. And when the Norok is pictured in occult books, many times it's pictured with the butt of the staff crushed onto the head of a dove. Now, Skeletor introduces most of the occult within the toy series. He has the ability to mind control, to levitate, to astral project.
He has
and
superpowers because he's a
do many
super
other occult
villain.
practices and pagan religion practices.
So
And
you're telling me little
a lot of these
boys,
fantasy
for
elements
instance,
come
could
from
watch
like
Skeletor
other
with his staff of power here,
fantasy
and they could- and you say
fiction
this is
like
actually used to
Conan
crush
and stuff like
a
that.
dove that represents total satanic power. Of course, we know that the goat's head, the ram's head,
Hi-fi.
represents Satan anyway in the
Yeah.
occult. So little boys are really being programmed to evil. And where does Skeletor live?
Programmed to
Well,
evil.
Skeletor lives in Eternia with He-Man. Now,
I wonder-
Eternia is a good world that they live
How
in.
many
We'll see
fans
some things
of
about
He-Man
Eternia
and the
a little
Master of the
later on.
Universe
Now, who lives in
became
Snake Mountain?
Well, Skeletor
dark
lives in
wizards
Snake Mountain.
as
Can we
adults?
talk about Snake Mountain?
If
Sure,
you were a
let's take
fan
look
of
at it.
He-Man
Now,
and you
we have
became
toy that
a
we got at
dark
the
wizard
store,
as an
which
adult,
is,
please leave a
called
comment.
Simply Snake Mountain. I thought I'd
Snake
get this
Mountain,
toy up here
that's
if we can get that on the
nice
screen.
playset.
And here's the
Be
snake
careful
and all.
with
I
it.
mean, this is definitely an occultic toy.
Occultic.
And it's got an interesting little feature here. I'm going to turn it on. It can actually transform your voice from your regular voice to that of an occultic hero. Is that
Occultic
correct?
hero.
So let's get a
Occultic
Skeletor
hero.
type of voice.
It's just a
Let me turn this on here.
It's
I
just
think I'm
a
getting it too loud.
voice distorting microphone.
Skeletor, the master of the universe. Does that give you kind of an example of?
Yeah, you should see
I
the
think he
commercial
enjoyed
they
that.
play with it. You know, it
I think he was like,
transforms your voice
this
into
is
that.
fun. I will be playing with this
So,
later
little-
after the show.
Little children would actually use that to even identify more with these occultic heroes. Right?
Occultic.
Yeah.
Well, I think it would be interesting if we went.
Of course,
to
those are
another
the
video
villains, not
showing
the
even
heroes,
more
but they
of
don't
the
care.
occultic
It's-
overtones in these different characters. So let's go to another He-Man serial right now, showing the occult.
Yes, please. Let's see more He-Man.
Great challenge facing you, He-Man. Perhaps the greatest of your life. Have you ever heard of the Star Seed?
I thought it was a myth.
It is no myth. It is real.
I like how He-Man's
And
voice
it
is
right
kind of
here in Eternia. Let me show
echoey.
you in the mirror. Eternia is an unusual planet, for we are located directly in
Man,
the
that's-
center of the universe. It was here
That's
where
a
we now
crotch point of
stand,
view
that the
of He-Man.
explosion took place, which created the universe billions of years ago. At the very center of our planet, there is a small piece of the energy left from that explosion.
So they're
The very
they're sort
energy
of
that set the stars burning, and the
mythologizing the
the
story
star seed.
of the
Speak
Big
a
Bang.
thing to the star seed and it makes it
You know,
happen.
which is science.
It can do anything. It is
Yeah.
all powerful.
I mean,
For
it's
untold
they're
ages,
making
the location
a
of the star
fantasy
seed was
story
known
about it, but the
only
Big
to a
Bang
chosen
isn't
few of the
occultic.
cosmic forces.
Don't drink.
But its
I said it.
location
Only
is
drink
no
when they
longer
say it.
a secret.
But the Big
At this
Bang isn't
very moment,
occultic. That's
Skeletor is
science.
tunneling his way to the center of Eternia. Can you imagine?
But hey, since
what
it
would
isn't occultic,
Is this possible,
they should have no
Bill, as
problem
we're
with it,
watching
right?
This witch talking. She's talking about the creation of the universe, how it was created with a great big explosion, or what some of the scientists would call the Big Bang Theory today, which totally throws out creationism.
Oh.
And then we see her saying the star seed
What a
is all
shocker.
powerful, and she mentions
They still have a
Skeletor
problem
and
with it,
Castle
even though it
Grayskull,
isn't
which we'll get
occultic.
to a little later. But all of
Because it
this,
doesn't
we're
line up
seeing
with
such occultic overtones, and
their
this,
belief
segment we just
of
played
the
was not something
magical
we looked for.
origin
We just
of
turned on the TV
the
and
universe.
recorded the first segment we saw. Isn't that correct?
That's right.
All right, that's the end of part 2. Okay, so what have we learned? We've learned that their objection to something like He-Man is not all because it's occultic. Anything in it that doesn't align with their belief system, including elements of science such as the Big Bang, they're against that. Well, of course, they are welcome to be. But that doesn't have anything to do with leading children to demonism and occulticism, whatever. These things are fantasy. It's make-believe. Children generally accepted it as such. I mean, they can tell that it's a cartoon. They probably notice that the toys are made of plastic, and that they make the toys move and talk and say the things that they want to say. It's fantasy. They need to show that it actually causes the harm that they say it will. What they say is that it has led children away from the church and into New Age and the occult. We have the benefit of hindsight now. Now we're like 30, almost 40 years later, and there's still a lot of churches around, still a lot of religious people around, still a lot of Christians around. And somehow, when they were children and played with He-Man, they were not led to become witches. I don't think that their alarmism about these things has been borne out with the facts. Anyway, we'll move on to Deception of Generation Part 3 at some point in the future. Thanks for watching.